Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Diamonds in the Rough podcast, episode 8. We have a special guest on the show today. We have Del Jones. He is the author of At the Bat, the Strikeout that Shamed America, and the Cremation of Sam McGee. So 2 books. Del, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for inviting me.
Good to have you on. Now, your book, At the Bat, the Strikeout that Shamed America, is ranked number 9 on the Goodreads list of the 112 greatest baseball novels of all time. How does this make you feel? And tell people who are baseball lovers a little about your book and why they should go read it if they haven't already. Also, where can they go to buy this book and your other one?
Oh, okay. Well, it makes me feel pretty good. There's some really good books in the top 10 of the baseball novels. Some of them have been made into movies, so people are familiar with them, like The Natural. And there's a book called Shoeless Joe that is basically what Field of Dreams was made at. And those books are all both in the top 10. And so it's a real honor to be kind of ranked among those novels, baseball novels. Like you said, there's 112 baseball novels. I don't think if you looked at all of them, a lot of them probably people have never heard of. But when you get to the top ones, you kind of know that they're there. And I essentially wrote the novel. My first novel, The Cremation of Sam McGee, was built upon a famous poem that my father used to know by heart. And after I wrote that, I was kind of looking around to write another novel, and probably the most famous. One of the most famous poems ever written was Casey at the Bat. And so that gave me kind of a story in itself to build a broader story upon. I just took the poem. I mean, what happens in the Casey at the Bat poem happens in the novel, but it also includes a lot that happens before the strikeout and after the strikeout. It kind of bounces around in time because I didn't want the 5-6 consecutive chapters at the ball game. So it'll start with a chapter before the strikeout, and it'll go into a chapter where you're at the game itself, and it'll bounce over to what happens kind of after the strikeout, what happens to Casey. And I think your other question is where you can get it. You can get it on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. I tell a lot of people listen on in the car. And so I always tell people, if you go on Amazon and you search for Strikeout, it's usually one of the first 3 hits that you get just with a general search on Strikeout. So that's an easy way to find it.
Okay, sounds good. Being that February is Black History Month, who are some of your all-time favorite African-American athletes from any sport, past or present, and why?
Oh, okay. My boyhood hero, this is going to show how old I am, but my boyhood hero was Willie Mays. I remember I actually saw him. I lived in Albuquerque when I was a young child, and Willie Mays, he was still playing for the Giants. No, he was with the Mets at that time. He was at the end of his career, and he was with the Mets. And they actually came and played preseason. They came and played an exhibition game against the minor league team in Albuquerque. So I actually got to see Willie Mays. I probably got within 30 feet of him, and that was like a thrill because he was my boyhood hero. Both my parents grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I kind of inherited that team as my favorite team. So he was it, and then because I was a Giants fan, Barry Bonds was also a big hero. I actually took. Even with the steroid thing, I just think he's an amazing athlete. And I took my kids. I live in the Washington, D.C. area now. And before even the Washington Nationals were a team, the Baltimore Orioles were kind of the team that the people in the Washington, D.C. area rooted for. So I took the San Francisco Giants were playing the Baltimore Orioles, and Cal Ripken was nearing the consecutive game record, and Barry Bonds was in the game, and I took both my kids to see that game. And of course, they, the first 3 or 4 at bats, Barry Bonds was intentionally walked, and like so many people that go to see him hit a home run, I was just kind of disappointed. And then they actually pitched to him his last at bat, and he cranked one out. So I got to see Barry Bonds hit a home run. So those are probably my two most favorite athletes. You know, I kind of, as you can tell, I'm kind of a baseball fan.
Yeah, I definitely hear you on that. I remember when I was a kid, I read a book about Willie Mays, and all the things I read about him was he was such a great baseball player. Obviously, I wasn't around back then to get to see him play, but I did a lot of Barry Bonds' career, and I did see Barry Bonds because I used to live in South Florida, so I used to go to a lot of Miami Marlins games. I was there when Barry Bonds was one of the coaches on the team. I believe he was the hitting coach. So I used to see Barry Bonds, before games. I don't know if I got to see him play, but he was just an extraordinary hitter, a Gold Glover in the outfield, and eventually broke the all-time home run record. It's too bad what happened with the whole PEDs and the steroid investigation. But Barry Bonds was a joy to watch, and as well as Willie Mays. Even though I didn't get to see Willie Mays back in the day, I read a book about him. I heard a lot of good things about him, and he was a great player too.
Yeah,
two great all-around baseball players to watch.
Yeah. I think he has an autobiography that's been out maybe 3 or 4 years. I think it's called 24, which was his number, and it was an autobiography that he came out with. And he's still alive. I haven't heard anything. I haven't seen him or heard much about his health, but he's still around.
Yeah. Barry Bonds actually, I think, wore number 24 and 25. I think Barry Bonds is the godson of Willie Mays.
Yeah,
I think that they are related.
Yeah, and I think they need to do something about the steroid era with the Hall of Fame too. I mean, it's not like they were taking steroids and it was definitely helping them, but it's not like they weren't great athletes. And I think they need to figure out some way with an asterisk or something to get the cream of that era into the Hall of Fame. I think that it's kind of past time to like punish them for that. And the only drawback is that you're hurting. There might have been some great athletes that weren't doing steroids who didn't have the numbers as the steroid takers. So that's kind of the drawback, is if there were some clean players that now just don't make the Hall of Fame because there were so many steroid takers. But you got to believe that a lot of those players are just some of the greatest ever.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think one of these days they'll find a way to get all those guys in the Hall of Fame that were involved in the steroid era, like Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa. I mean, even Pete Rose. But I mean, obviously, what Pete Rose did was much worse with the whole gambling thing. But I think eventually, once these guys are punished and they've waited long enough to get in the Hall of Fame, I think eventually they will be in the Hall of Fame someday, because I mean they deserve to be. They were great ball players despite using steroids. So hopefully one of these days that they will be in the Hall of Fame. But
you were asking me about Black History Month. There's a character in my novel his name is Moses Fleetwood Walker. The novel is all fiction, and Casey was a fictional character, but I kind of like put in like real live baseball players from that era into the game, and I needed a catcher because the catchers. The book is narrated by the umpire who struck out Casey, and of course you've got Casey at bat, and I needed I got a pitcher who was the winningest pitcher not in the Hall of Fame. His name was Mouse Matthews. He pitched in the 1880s. He had 297 wins. So I used him as my pitcher. And then my catcher was Moses Fleetwood Walker, who played one major league season in 1884. And he was the last African-American player in the major leagues until Jackie Robinson, or until, if you can include the Negro leagues now, they've been included in the major leagues. But before they did that, he was the last African-American to play before Jackie Robinson. And everything I read a lot about him, and everything I read, he was just a great defensive catcher, kind of an average hitter. So I thought, well, who better to have my catcher? And I used him. I had him kind of pretending, which was fairly common at the time, pretending he was Mexican, and he was pretending that he didn't even understand English during the game. And he was, he was college educated. Moses Fleetwood Walker was college educated. He went to Oberlin in Ohio. So I had him speaking Spanish in the game and kind of like sneaking him into the game. And then there was I used as my manager, Cap Anson, who was kind of a known racist at the time. He actually took his team when he played with the Cincinnati Red Stockings, I believe. He had his team like leave the field one time when the opposing team had black players on the team. So he was kind of and he's been kind of like credited with he was like a really well-known player, and he's been kind of credited with getting blacks banned from baseball. And so I had him managing the game. So it's kind of got that tension, that kind of a little bit of a racial tension. So I wanted to bring that up since you were talking about Black History Month.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely got a chance to read a little bit about your book. Obviously, I haven't read the book yet, but I'm looking forward to definitely reading it and getting the whole story. Now, I read that you were a fast pitch softball umpire at the high school and college level, and now you currently officiate high school basketball and field hockey. What was and is that like, and which of those sports do you enjoy officiating the most?
That's a good question. I like them all. My daughter was a fast pitch softball player, so that's kind of where I started when she finished her high school and collegiate softball career. I liked the sport enough where I wanted to stay involved in it. So that's the sport I originally got into, and it's probably the sport I'm best at. But for any people who want to get into officiating, it transfers over very well. I mean, for every sport you do as an official, you have to learn the rule book, but a lot of things like dealing with coaches and players and all that game management kind of thing, that transfers so easily from one sport to another that once I was used to being yelled at as an umpire, it was like really easy to be yelled at as a basketball referee. And field hockey is almost like really tame compared to those sports. It's a sport that has kind of a reputation as being like really polite and that kind of thing. And a lot of the more officials than the other sports I work in are women. And we would walk off the field after a field hockey game, and they would be saying, "Oh, those fans were just really terrible. They were really on our case." And I'm like, "What? I didn't hear." I didn't hear anything compared to softball and basketball. I didn't hear anything. So it's kind of like what you get used to. And that's another thing you get used to when you officiate one sport. You just get used to being able to kind of like deal with that, because that's just part of the game. I mean, it's usually not directed at the official themselves. They're just coaches and players, or they want to win. And so when they see something that they think goes against them or does go against them, they're going to get upset, and you just have to kind of like learn to deal with that.
Definitely. I agree. I agree. Today's officiating has become a little bit more easier with the instant replay, or with the replay of some of the calls. Like if a referee misses a call, they're able to go back and look at the replay. The coach will be able to challenge the call, and they'll be able to go back and review the play and make the correct call. Whereas back in the day, you didn't have that replay review, where you just have to kind of have to make the call on the spot. And then if you got it wrong, you got it wrong. And then, that could decide a lot of games. But it's good that they do have instant replay now in baseball, basketball, and football, where the referees are able to go back and look at the play over again to make sure that they get the call right. Whereas opposed to back in the day, you didn't have that, and you had a lot of referees miss calls. There's a bunch of times I've been watching games, and I'll be like, how did the referee miss that? I mean, it's such an easy call, but I mean, when you're watching it live, like on the fly, I mean, there's so many things going on, and it's like, it's got to be tough. Refereing is definitely a tough job, dealing with, the players and the coaches, and then you'll have fans yelling at you and all that stuff. So I can only imagine, how hard it is to actually be a referee. So, I mean, for you to be able to do that, I mean, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty good. You've obviously been doing it for a while. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm a real fan of instant replay myself. And I think one of the things that it has done, it has taken away the home field and the home court advantage a little bit, because when you're officiating at that level where it's televised and there's going to be replays, all of a sudden you are no longer, as an official, like paying as much attention to the home crowd on calls as much as you are thinking, how am I going to look when they show this in instant replay? No longer, probably in the day before they had instant replay, it would be somewhat of a factor when you had like 10,000 people just booing at you about a call. And now I don't think they care so much about that as they are about getting the call right, because that is kind of like what determines the whole thing at the end. And I also think it's helped officials. I mean, you still see where officials make mistakes, but it also teaches fans the importance of angles. As a sports official, it's so much more important to have the right angle on a play than it is to be close to a play. And the best way it's really easy to describe that to people who aren't familiar with officiating, but they watch games. And I always give the example, like if you're watching an NFL football game and there's a fumble in the game and there's like a real decision about, was the knee down before the fumble happened or not. And so, regardless of what the official rules, all of a sudden they'll be showing like one camera angle where it'll show where you're unsure or you'll be pretty sure of one thing. And then they'll show 3 or 4 other camera angles. And then all of a sudden, finally, they'll show the angle that actually tells you what happened. It'll tell you, the fumble was before the knee hit or vice versa. And it shows fans the importance of where the umpire, where the referee on the field is, how important it is to be in the right place when they're out there. I would think that is the most important thing, is they're thinking all the time of where am I and where do I need to be to see this the best, because they don't have 4 camera angles. They need to be where they need to be. And so I think it's kind of helped people understand officiating and the importance of angles out there.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Also, in your early career, you were a small town sports writer, and then you earned an MBA and became a business reporter for 18 years in the money section of the USA Today, and you were nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in beat reporting. Describe to me the similarities and differences in being a sports writer and then a business reporter, and what you learned most from each that others out there who have done the same thing can relate to.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they're quite different. In fact, I started out as a sports writer, and I still believe the best pure writing in journalism is in sports. I grew up kind of reading Sports Illustrated and publications like that. And I read them not only because I love sports, but because the writing was so much better than in even business reporting or political reporting or court reporting. They just have more freedom. Sports writers just have more freedom to be creative, and so that's a major difference. And I was like kind of working my way up through small town newspapers, and I was told that it's kind of like catching in baseball. They say the fastest way to the major leagues in baseball is to be a catcher. The fastest way to be on a major publication in journalism is to be a business writer, because not very many people that are skilled at journalism also have a knowledge of business and finance and that kind of thing. And I had an interest in that. And so I got my MBA and I moved into business reporting, and that really helped me move up. I never got to use my creative skills as much, but it got me to a major publication. So that's kind of the differences. Is sports writing are like really good writers, and then other parts of journalism, they focus more on the beat, that they're kind of experts in their area. Like in the money section at USA Today, there would be an auto writer, and he knew everything about there is about cars and that kind of thing. In fact, if I was going to buy a car, I would go to that reporter and ask him about cars, because he knew everything. And so, as you get in like business section, you just get really, really focused areas of journalism, but not the pure writing.
I definitely could agree with that. I think definitely sports writers definitely have more freedom to write more, like make their columns or their articles more, opinionated, because sports are so popular. Whereas, if you're writing like about politics or something else, you have to really get like more factual and, really report the facts, because if you get anything wrong, you're gonna pretty much get scrutinized. Whereas a sports writer, you have more freedom to express yourself and give your opinion.
Yeah.
So I definitely see the difference.
Yeah, and that goes back through time. I mean, even before television and radio, if you go back, there's really good sports writing and columnists going back then, and it wasn't always opinion, but it was just like really creative, just the description of things. And in fact, I read a lot of, when I was writing my book, I did a lot of research, just reading newspapers from 1888, and the language was a lot different back then. Like the word baseball was 2 words. If you read in a newspaper back in the 1880s, baseball was 2 words, which I left it that way in my novel. I think a lot of people, the first few times when they read my book, they're like, this is a typo, or what's wrong with this guy? He doesn't know how to spell baseball. But I tried to keep, when I read all these newspapers from then, I tried to keep the same language that they used in the newspapers and use it in the book.
Sounds good, definitely. Now you currently live near the Washington, D.C. area, and your favorite baseball teams are the San Francisco Giants, like you mentioned earlier, and you also root for the Washington Nationals, both who have won a World Series in the last 10 years. The Giants won World Series in 2010, 2012, and 2014, and the Nationals more recently 2 years ago in 2019. Which of these teams do you root for most, and how do you think both these clubs will fare in the upcoming 2021 season?
Okay, that's a great question, because when the Nationals became a team, when they started the team here, I was a little disappointed because I already had a National League team favorite, and I kind of wanted an American League team to root for. But now I had 2 National League teams. I had my boyhood team, the San Francisco Giants, and now I have kind of the hometown team to root for. And the first time the Giants came to Washington to play in a 5-game series, I got tickets. I was like really excited. I can go to one game and see my 2 favorite teams play against each other. But I was like completely disappointed because I didn't care who won. It was kind of like all of a sudden I was like watching a game on TV where I didn't care who won the game. It felt like that. And so I told myself I'm never going to go see those 2 teams play each other again, because I want to, when I go to a game, especially a live game, I want to really be invested in the game. And so that's kind of like what happened there. And let's see, you were asking me how they were going to fare. Oh yeah, the Giants had their run. I mean, they had several years where they were really good and have been really down for a long time. And I wouldn't be surprised if they remain down this season. I don't think they have too big of prospects. The Washington Nationals, I mean, that World Series that they won 2 years ago was kind of amazing. It was a 7-game series with Houston, I think.
Houston, yeah.
Houston,
Astros.
yeah. Yeah. And not a single game was won at home. The Nationals, I think, had the first 2. They won the first 2, and everybody said, well, they got it in the bag. And then it went to Houston. That was in Houston. The Nationals won the first 2, and then it came to Washington, and Houston swept 3 here, and all of a sudden they were the favorite. And then the Nationals went back and won 2 games, the 6th and 7th game in Houston. So it was kind of an amazing World Series. And I don't even think that was their best team. That season, I kind of checked out on them because they started just terrible. And it was like after they traded Bryce Harper, and they just didn't look like they had it. And I, as a fair weather fan, I guess I just kind of quit paying much attention to them for a few weeks. And then all of a sudden I look at the standings, and they had gotten hot. I mean, they weren't going to win the division, but I looked at the standings. I say, my goodness, they have a chance of making the wild card team, which they eventually did that season. So I don't think that was I think their best season. I mean, the best team they had. I think they actually lost to the Giants in the first round of the playoffs. I thought that they were a much better team than the Giants, and I thought they were probably the best team in the National League. But they didn't get by the first round in that game. So I think the Nationals. I don't think they're probably again. I think they're probably it's going to be the Mets, but the Nationals have always seemed to be in there.
Yeah, that year when the Nationals won the World Series, I remember writing an article. I think halfway through the year they were under 500, and nobody thought they would make the playoffs. And they kind of turned things around and just got hot at the right time, and were able to go all the way. And that World Series was one of the best World Series I ever saw. I mean, the road team won every single game. I was rooting for the Nationals to win that World Series because they never won one before, and everybody talked about Houston like they were the favorite. But I was so happy to see the Nationals finally win the World Series. And growing up, my favorite team that I rooted for growing up was the Atlanta Braves.
Oh, okay.
Before the Miami Marlins came into existence in 1993, because I'm from South Florida, and I'm pretty much a Miami sports fan. So I grew up rooting for the Atlanta Braves, and I remember watching those Braves teams with Terry Pendleton and David Justice and Ron Gann. I used to root for them all the time, and they always used to get to the World Series, and they would just always lose and disappoint me. They were kind of like the Buffalo Bills of baseball. I mean, they got to like 4 World Series and only won one, but at least they got one. They won that one against the Cleveland Indians back in 1995 or 96. But yeah, I rooted for the Braves up until 1993 when the Marlins came into existence, and I started rooting for the Marlins. And now, you know, you have the Marlins and Braves in the same division in the NL East, and then they're pretty much rivals. So I don't root for the Braves anymore. I'm strictly a Marlins fan. I kind of root for the Yankees as well. But, you know, when the Marlins came into existence in 1993, I started rooting for them, and I was just so impressed. You know, they were able to get to the World Series in 1997, and that team was really good that year. They got to the World Series in 97 and won the World Series against the Cleveland Indians, and then 6 years later did it again in 2003, beating the mighty Yankees in Yankee Stadium. I believe Josh Beckett was the pitcher that won Game 6 in that World Series. But the Marlins look like a team that's on the rise. I like what Derek Jeter's doing with that club. Obviously, they got rid of some guys who were fan favorites like Giancarlo Stanton, Christian Yelich, Marcelo Ozuna. But I like what Derek Jeter's doing with this team moving forward. They made the playoffs, you know, last year in a 60-game season. Obviously, you know, it was just playing the division. But moving forward, I think this Marlins team is going to be good. You know, they have some good, you know, young prospects. The NL East is a really competitive division. You know, with the Braves, you got the Mets, obviously the Nationals. You know, the Phillies have Bryce Harper, so it's really competitive. You know, in the National League overall, it's just competitive. I mean, you got the Dodgers coming back. The Dodgers are loaded, and now they got Trevor Bauer, and that pitching staff's really good. So I mean, National League's loaded, and you know, American League pretty much is wide open with the Yankees and, you know, Indians, Astros, Oakland. So I mean, baseball is probably one of the hardest sports to repeat in. Like once you win one World Series, it's hard to come back and win another. Just like in football, to me, I think basketball is probably the easiest sport where you can repeat. Baseball and football are so much harder to come back and win back-to-back titles. But I mean, we'll see what happens this year. I think you know, the Nationals will have a good team, and you know, we'll see what the Giants do this season. I'm looking forward to baseball season coming up. For 2021, hopefully they'll be able to play a full season, 162 games without any delays or any problems with COVID.
Yeah, I grew up liking the Atlanta Braves as well, because back then they were kind of the superstation or whatever it was. It was Ted Turner, like it was like one of the first cable stations where they just broadcast the Atlanta Braves games all over, and the whole they kind of became like the Dallas Cowboys. They were like America's team, because everybody, you know, they all got their hometown games, but they could also see the Braves. So that was good. And you must, are you a Tampa Bay football fan? I mean,
no, I'm a Dolphins fan, but I was happy. I was happy to see the Buccaneers win the Super Bowl, even though, you know, it was Tom Brady, and Tom Brady broke my heart so many times with the Patriots. So I mean, I was happy to see Tampa Bay get their second Super Bowl. They waited, what was it, 18 years? The last one went in 2002. So. They definitely deserved it. They had a great run.
They played a great game. My goodness.
Yeah, they had a great game plan going into the Super Bowl, and you know, winning all their playoff games on the road to get the Super Bowl at home in Tampa, and you know, just being able to hold that Chiefs offense and Patrick Mahomes to 9 points. What a job that the defensive coordinator did for the Buccaneers, for them to win that game.
Yeah, and they made the best quarterback in the NFL look bad. They really did, Mahomes. Yeah,
they made Patrick Mahomes look human. I mean, I expect the Chiefs to be good again next year.
I would think.
Yeah, I live up here in Buffalo now, so you know, I got to deal with Bills Mafia. It's hard being a Dolphins fan up here.
Yeah.
The Bills will be good next year again. They won the AFC East this past year, so they'll definitely have a good team next year. We'll see what they do on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe J.J. Watt, you know, might end up coming to Buffalo, or it's possibly Green Bay or Pittsburgh. Who knows? And you know, Russell Wilson's kind of frustrated with what's going on in Seattle, and we got everything going on with Deshaun Watson to see where he might end up. So, you know, I'm looking forward to football, free agency, and trades, and you know, the draft. Football has really become pretty much a year-round sport. You know, the whole year is nothing but football.
Yeah. Well, here they're playing high school football now. They canceled the season in the fall, and the high schools are actually playing their high school football season right now. It's just starting, so it's really odd. Everything's getting mixed up. I turned on the local news yesterday, and all of a sudden they're showing, high school football games. I'm going, well, what time of year is it?
Yeah, definitely. All right, before we wrap up here, finally, I wanted to ask you, do you have any other projects in the works, and where can people find you online to connect with you?
Oh, okay. I've got, I've kind of like now I've developed this thing about where I write novels based on poems. So I'm kind of like looking around for another kind of ballad-like poem. I like poems that are fairly well known and also tell a story. I consider myself to be a pretty good writer, but when I got out of journalism, I just didn't know how to like shape an entire novel, come up with kind of a whole story. And so that kind of worked for me. The poem like gave me kind of a nucleus of a story that I could expand on. So I'm kind of looking for another poem to write a second or a third novel about. And let's see, I forgot your other question.
Where can people connect with you?
Oh,
where can people find you online and connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn I think is probably the best place. I'm on other social media, but a lot of that's kind of friends. I'm not heavily on Twitter, but LinkedIn. If you just search for Dell Leonard Jones on LinkedIn, for professional type connections and stuff, I think that's the best.
Sounds good, Dell. It's definitely great having you on the show, ladies and gentlemen. Dell Jones, the author of At the Bat, the Strikeout That Changed America, and also the Cremation of Sam McGee. You know where to find them online. Dell, I want to thank you so much for coming on my show, and we'll definitely keep in touch and definitely have you on again. Good luck to your baseball teams this year, San Francisco Giants and the Washington Nationals. We'll see how they do, and I'll definitely look forward to hopefully getting a chance to read your book and any other work you have coming out. Thanks so much, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Robert. Enjoyed it. Great interview.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, Robert Strite, Big Shot Rob Strite, host of Diamonds in the Rough podcast, episode 8. We had Dell Jones on the show today. I want to thank everybody. Make sure you go out there and subscribe to the channel, support the show. Stay tuned for my next episode, episode 9 next week. We'll definitely try to have another guest on the show and possibly have a recap of the Creating Young Minds Undiscovered Basketball League. Make sure you check that out. But I want to thank everybody out there for supporting the show. Subscribe, and I'll leave you guys with the instrumental here from Kanye West, Diamonds from Sierra Leone, to ride out. And everybody out there, have a good rest of your day and a good weekend. Stay safe and take care of each other.